All right, the issue with marketing and promotion in the UFC. So I want to do something different in this video where I just don't simply blame the UFC and the fighters. I want to do something different and start blaming the fans as well. I'm going to pretty much blame every single entity that there is to blame. So let's just jump straight into it, right? So we have to blame the UFC first. Obviously, this is a no-brainer. We're talking about a company that just signed a $7.7 billion deal with Paramount Plus, or just Paramount in general, and we're talking about all of these massive flaws and holes, and in their promotional, I guess, tools or in their promotional game. So the first thing we have is the lack of extensive promotional tools. Obviously, it would be at least better to have different kinds of, video promos instead of just relying simply on like, fighters fights and matches as like their main promo base, because every time there's a fight coming up or an event coming up, they don't really put on a good promotional video. They just simply compile matches from that specific fighter's resume or catalog, and they just kind of combine it together, and that is what they call video promo. And even like, for example, they could start taking notes from boxing and just start implementing stuff like face-to-face videos and stuff like that. It would not cost them much. I don't know why they don't do it, and obviously they shouldn't be doing it for every single fight. They should just be doing it for fights that people are looking most forward to, in terms of like if those two fighters have beef with each other and stuff like that. Like most notably coming up, you have Chimaev and Strickland. That fight should have a face-to-face. But then again, I guess, we are going to have a press conference. There most likely will be a lot of security guards, but it's just, it's different when it's a press conference, when you have like other people in the stage, other fighters will get asked questions, and even the reporters will ask stupid questions, as opposed to like, having them sit, face to face in a room by themselves with only one host in the middle, and they could just go at it, nonstop. So that's the first thing. Relying on AI slop, obviously the two most notable, and I think the two, main examples. First of all, you had UFC 326 when they had Charles Oliveira face off with Holloway in the octagon. I thought it was real for a second, but then turned out to be AI because Charles just looked weird. And then obviously the second example, which is the most recent one, is for the White House promo. Again, I don't understand why they need to use AI in that case, because it's not like the video is too complex and they can never ever implement something like this by just simply bringing in the fighters and doing it legitimately, because all the video was is just Topuria and Pereira and Gunn and I think Gaethje just stepping out of their limousines or their cars, and they're wearing suits and they're just walking to the White House. Like, how is that something that you needed AI for? You could just hit them up, tell them to come to the specific place to the specific time, and just start farming ideas and just record a nasty, nice, video for the promo for the White House card. But again, they're relying on the AI slop. Obviously, as I said, cannot implement simple videos like face to faces. Also, no sponsorship for the fighters. I mean, back in the days they used to have that, but nowadays they're just not like that. I mean, I think you even remember like a few days ago or like last week during the Aljamain Sterling versus Yusuf Zalal fight week. I think it was on the media day where Aljo like brought his, I think, alcohol bottles or something like that, or like whiskey bottles, something like that. Basically his own brand. He put it on the table, and then the UFC staff told him to just remove it, which I found to be stupid. Like, just let the fighters promote their own stuff. It's not like they're making huge amounts of money and the UFC is just not benefiting. Like the UFC, they're not paying the fighters as much. We know this. So at least let them have their own sponsorships and let them advertise it, right? So, and also when it comes to just, the incentive of the fighters, like there's really no incentive for even the unranked guys and the ranked guys to stay active unless they just want to become champions, no more, no less. Like they don't really care about the pay, right? So when you have this sort of system or structure where the UFC is not allowing the fighters to be sponsored by anybody or promote their sponsorships, and also the payment or the salary is just, they're being underpaid, it doesn't give the fighters any reason to stay motivated, to stay active in the octagon, right? Like you would expect these unranked fighters to be similar to what they are like in boxing, where they're just averaging 4 fights, 5 fights per year. But in the UFC, it's not like that. They're barely even averaging 4 fights, 3 fights a year. I know you have people like Kevin Holland, who's not really a prospect, obviously, but he is averaging a lot of fights per year. You have a couple of these people, but like it's not a lot of them. You could count them on a hand. Like you have maybe Walter Cortez, you have Kevin Holland, like you have some of these fighters that would average more than 3 fights per year, but it's just like for the rest of the fighters, you can't simply put all of the blame on them for not fighting actively, because the UFC is just not giving them that sort of incentive unless they just have world title aspirations, no more, no less. And obviously the meritocracy and the integrity is gone. And what I mean by that is just the fact that like you have people that would undeservedly get the title shots over certain other people. Like they would see, for example, the number one contender is not getting the title shot that he deserves, but then someone like the number six, number seven would get the title shot instead of him. So that also just doesn't motivate them much to climb to the top if they know that the number one contender is not getting the title shot because maybe of the fact that he's not the most interesting fighter to watch stylistically, which again should not be a reason as to why you should prohibit him from not getting a title shot or delay him further. But this is another one of the, also one of the reasons why they're just not going to stay active and why the promotion is just kind of bad because the fighters don't stay active as much because of the UFC's doing, right? You're not giving them any reason to stay active, which as a result, the promotion will go down the drain. So those are the reasons why I'd blame the UFC for the lack of promotion. Then we go to the fighters, right? The first reason I have is not putting on the right performances that would otherwise boost their stocks. We have a lot of these fighters nowadays, specifically from this new era, where they just, hold you up on the fence, knee the thigh. They're not really striking as much, or at least even if your specialty is grappling or wrestling, you could still make that look interesting and entertaining. Like I know some people would say like, oh, if you don't want to watch wrestling, go watch kickboxing or Muay Thai. Like that's not what the majority of the people are talking about. They're basically saying like if you're a wrestler or a grappler, at least be entertaining when you're doing it. At least try to look for submissions. At least try to have some good exchanges on the ground instead of just like laying on somebody and that's it. I.e. the Chimaev DDP fight, Islam versus JDM fight, Oliveira versus Holloway fight. Then again, these fights aren't the worst. I would say the worst one out of all of them would be Chimaev versus DDP. But again, these guys are like stars already, right? They're stars already. But then when you're talking about people like, let's say, I don't even know, Mario Batista, when he fought Jose Aldo, the way he fought him, like it's impossible for him to become a star after that performance. I know now he's redeeming himself, but it's just, I don't know. You have a lot of these fighters that know, okay, this is an easy way for me to win a fight, right? Like this is an easy route for me to win a fight, but it's like the drawback is that you just won't become an attraction. Like you may be in the rankings, top 15, top 10, but you're not going to become an attraction. You're not going to be someone that people are going to look forward to watching. Not staying active. It goes back to the previous point when I blamed the UFC, but then again, it's not always that the UFC is to blame because sometimes these fighters don't even deserve, an increase in pay if they're just not like that high level. Like let's say they're unranked, or let's say they're just not putting on the right performances, or they're losing, or whatever the reason may be. You still have to stay active, and if you're not going to stay active, that could also be, your fault, and you're the one to blame in certain occasions, in certain circumstances, right? And even when it comes to the champions, like you have someone like Ilya Topuria averaging one fight per year, Chimaev, same thing. It's like, what are their excuses? They're getting paid a lot of money because they're champions, they're superstars, right? So it's like, what are their excuses for not staying active? Lack of personality. I mean, listen, it's either that they don't have a personality or they just try to copy somebody else. That's just pretty much it. It's either that they just don't have a single personality, they're bland and stale and boring on the microphone or even in the build up in interviews, or they're just trying to copy Conor McGregor. That's pretty much it. That's how the fighters roll around. None of them have a personality. I guess Josh Hockett is now here, but then again, it's like the fact that people are praising Josh Hockett just goes to show how low the standards have gotten, in the UFC when it comes to like promotional skills and stuff like that. So those are the reasons why I also will blame the fighters. Maybe there can be other reasons as to why, the promotion is lacking when it comes to, the fighters themselves. But here is where I'm going to be a little bit different from the other people that were discussing this topic, because obviously this topic has been talked about for so many years, for so many times, and I rarely see people blame the fans. But hear me out. The first reason I have is that they have extremely high expectations. Many fun fighters with fun personalities, but they don't get recognized as much because they're not Conor. So with extremely high expectations, it's like I feel as though these people expect these fighters to be like Mayweather-esque or even McGregor-esque or something like that, Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey level, and it's like you have to keep your expectations low with everything. If you want to be satisfied with something, if you want to be comfortable with something, you have to keep low expectations. You have to keep your expectations low about every single fighter. Even if that fighter, let's say he's, stacking up some good wins, some good knockouts, he's on the come up, you shouldn't expect him to be the next McGregor. Like I'm seeing people, for example, with Mauricio Huffy was knocking out people like James Longtop and Bobby Green. They thought of him as like the next Conor McGregor because of the way he was striking, but that he eventually lost to Benoit Saint Denis, right? And when you put him on this, severely, colossally high pedestal, and then all of a sudden he loses to someone like Benoit, the hype goes away because you had such high expectations when nobody told you to have high expectations. Like these guys are unranked or they're lower ranked opponents or whatever it may be. You shouldn't be having such high expectations because eventually, you would set a standard and you would have certain, you know, fantasies, I guess. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but like you would have certain imaginations about the specific fighter being like a double champ or, a massive superstar, but then they go out of their way and lose a fight, right? But then again, just because they lost a fight doesn't mean it's the end of the road for them, right? Many fighters with fun personalities, but they don't get recognized as much because they're not Conor. Listen, I know there's like a lack of personality problem in the UFC, but it's like you do have some good personalities. It doesn't have to be people that are brash and arrogant and annoying and outspoken and loud and stuff like that, like Conor McGregor, for them to be stars. But it's the fact that Conor has set a standard as to like, if you want to become a star, you have to do this, you have to do this. And the fans are just basically used to that and nothing else. When you have like great personalities, let's say people that are just straight up being nice, being themselves, being real, people don't like that. They want someone that just trash talks and stuff like that. Those are the kinds of people that would get the most traction out of anybody else, which I find to be stupid because everyone has their own unique set of personalities. Um, but even when you talk about like trash talkers, let's say like Dricus Duplessis was making people cry. He made Izzy cry. He made Sean Strickland cry in the press conference. Like he was a good champion. He was a great champion. Like not only did he defend his title multiple times, he was willing to fight everybody in the division, but he was also a good trash talker in his own right. But then again, he never even came close to becoming that kind of big star, right? And even his fighting personality, although it's awkward and goofy, but it's still entertaining. You have someone like, let's say, I mean, you name the fighter, there are multiple people, right? Like in each division. I mean, even Morab can be entertaining as well. I know fighting style wise, he's not the most exciting, but in his last couple of fights, I mean, against Corey Sandhagen, that was a good fight. He did submit Sean O'Malley. He did have a very good fight against Piotr Jan, and he's active. So it's like you get these sorts of people, but again, the fans don't appreciate them because they're not Conor McGregor. And I have a feeling that they don't appreciate these fighters until they retire. That's what it's going to be. I think it's a similar situation to, like, for example, Izzy and Kamaru Usman. When they were around, people did not appreciate them as much when they were actively defending their titles. But then all of a sudden, when they retired, now it's like, where are they? I hope they can come back and make a resurgence and stuff like that. Fighter loses one fight, equal abandoned. I mean, this is what I just talked about. It's like they have such high expectations about a fighter. Like a prospect comes up, and then when he loses a fight, that's it. The hype goes away. Like Malcolm Wellmaker, for example, he lost to Ethan Ewing, and now all of a sudden, no one talks about him. Or even, with Peyton Talbot, when he lost to Raoni Barcelos, people stopped talking about him up until he won the fight against Felipe Lima and Henry Cejudo. And I even think till this day, even though he beat Felipe Lima and Henry Cejudo, he doesn't have as much hype as he used to back when, he was knocking people out like Giannis Gumori and Cameron Simon, right? But it's just that even someone as big as Pereira, when he lost to Ankalaev, the hype went away. Like, it's just ridiculous to me, man. Like, just because they lost a fight doesn't mean it's the end of the road for them. Just because you had expectations of them being, like, undefeated and, invincible, unbeatable champions doesn't mean that's how it's going to be. Everyone has their own unique trajectory and path in the sport, right? And obviously, the last thing is we have still begging John Jones and McGregor to come back despite the talent we have. The fact that people are clinging on John Jones and McGregor, like specifically John Jones, who's like a massive just, he keeps on disappointing the UFC, turns down fights, pulls out of fights, so on and so forth, drug cheat, and people are still begging him to come back and fight on the White House and stuff like that. And it's like, we have people like Islam Makhachev, we have Ilya Topuria, we have Alex Pereira. Those are the new generation of fighters that need to be representing the UFC currently. Now, listen, I'm not going to try to be different and say that, like, oh, if John Jones and McGregor were both on the White House card, I would not watch it. Of course, I would watch it, but it's like, just because they're not on it doesn't mean that it's a massive letdown all of a sudden because they're no longer representing the new generation. You have to give the shine and the spotlight to the new generation of fighters to actually represent this new era, even if it's in the White House card. You have to give that opportunity to the biggest stars that we have right now. i.e. Pereira, Topuria, those kinds of people, right? Sean O'Malley's obviously on the card, stuff like that. You have up and comers like Mauricio Huffy, Steve Garcia, Diego Lopez, the newcomers. To me, the card is good, right? It can be better, obviously. If McGregor and Jones were on there, I would not complain. But it's like it's not the end of the world just because they're not on there. These guys are just done. John Jones retired. McGregor, I don't even know if he's ever gonna come back. So we have to stop sticking to them and begging them to fight or come back to fight and actually pay attention to the talent that we have, because let's not pretend that the UFC is completely dead, lackluster in terms of the talent and roster, because it's not. Like, you don't see people in boxing begging Floyd Mayweather to come back. You don't see that. Just because he was a massive or the biggest pay-per-view draw in boxing history doesn't mean that they're just gonna keep begging him till this day to come back and fight. People are paying attention to who are actually fighting, in boxing right now. Jerome Boots Ennis, Inoue, Usyk, those kinds of fighters. Bam Rodriguez, Shakur Stevenson. They're focusing on the people that are actually currently fighting and actively fighting. They're not paying attention to someone that still exists. He's still around, but he's just not fighting, and he's, retired, kind of semi-retired. But because he was the biggest pay-per-view draw, that means we have to just keep begging him to come back. It's nonsensical. We just have to move on, and deal with the fighters that we have in the roster, because they're actually talented and they're sick. So let me know what you guys think. If you agree, I think those 2 points, like for the UFC and for the fighters, this is like, I don't want to say regurgitated, but this is just from my own opinion. But I think most of the people agree with those takes. But when it comes to the fans, I know it will be kind of hard to digest this idea, because it's like the fans are the consumers. You have to satisfy them and stuff like that. But then again, there can be flaws within the audience and demographic. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that they can do no wrong, and the promotion is not being affected by the fans' perception, because I think it is. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you next time.